Welcome to video 2 on how to approach the critical reading section of the SAT. On the last video we ended up talking about Rule 3, how you have to read to understand, not map questions to answers, and you really have to understand tone. So I want you to keep this in mind because we're going to use this idea and this rule in this next question. But I want to talk about one more rule before we actually approach the actual question in hand. All right? And Rule 4 is the SAT looks harder than it is. The SAT uses esoteric language to obfuscate the reader. Okay? So that's Rule 4. So as you read this, hopefully you realize that what I'm doing is I'm writing a problem in perhaps a way that an SAT would write a question, right? I'm using words like esoteric and obfuscate, which, depending upon your vocabulary, you may really know or you may not know. But even if you don't know what these words mean, from the context, we can kind of figure out what these words mean. So take a second and pause the video and think to yourself, without looking up the word, ask yourself, what am I actually saying? So I'm going to assume that you've already paused and you try to answer the question. Let's actually approach it. Okay. So I said initially it looks harder than it is. So the SAT uses some type of language to some verb the reader. Okay. Well, if it's making it look harder, then esoteric probably means something like I don't know, fancy. Some sort of fancy language. And to what? To obfuscate the reader. So obfuscate, well, it's trying to seem hard, so I'm going to say use the verb confuse. It's to confuse the reader, right? And esoteric means a particular language, something that is very precise. And obfuscate means to confuse. So these are the words. So this is, in other words, the SAT uses fancy language to confuse the reader. And you don't need to know vocabulary. You don't need to know what they're talking about. In the last video, I was mispronouncing words that pertain to the question that we were dealing with, and it didn't matter. I didn't really need to understand. So don't get too intimidated by the language. Okay, it's written in that way on purpose. Okay, it's used to try to intimidate you, but it's never as hard as you think it is. Okay, so how do we attack this? Well, we kind of talked a little bit about this. Okay, so I just said, the first thing I said is use context, right? What is it talking about around? Read a sentence above, read a sentence after. See, replace it with words. Try your best to really understand what it's saying. Don't take too long doing that, but do try to understand what the context is more than just staring at it. 2, read the question, but not the answer choices, then passage. Okay, so what am I saying here? So in this question here, I'm not going to read this entire passage, right? We did that earlier. We said that's not a good idea, right? What I am going to do is I'm going to read the question first, right? Okay. Then I'm going to go through the passage and try to understand, try to find the answer inside the passage. And I'm going to read with a purpose, okay? So when I read this, it says the passage most strongly suggests that Adelita used which of the following to navigate her 9,000-mile journey, okay? So when I read this, I am trying to figure out, how did she navigate? How did this turtle, in this first line says, is a turtle called Adelita, right? How did this turtle navigate 9,000 miles, okay? Everything I'm reading is just, the sole purpose is to figure out why this freaking turtle was able to cross 9,000 miles. That's it. That's all I care about. Everything else is extra information. It's superfluous. Okay? And I'm going to answer the question shortly, but I want to go through all these. Okay? This is something else that's really important. don't read the answer choices. So why do you not want to read the answer choices? Well, you have this little problem, and we all have this little problem called the confirmation bias. So what is the confirmation bias? Well, the confirmation bias is, it's the idea behind it is like, have you ever purchased something? I'm going to use a car as an example. Let's say you purchased a brand new red sports car, right? What ends up happening is every time you get into the street, you start to notice that sports car more and more, okay? So let's say you got a new iPhone. Well, you're going to notice that iPhone, more and more people are going to be like, oh, you have the same phone as me. Oh, you have the same phone as me. Your brain confirms whatever it is that, whatever sort of bias you have. So what happens is if you believe that the answer is A, you read A and you like the way A sounds, you're going to look in the passage for something that confirms with A. Okay? So the confirmation bias is a very real thing. It's a very dangerous thing. Now I have a way to kind of really illustrate the confirmation bias. And it's actually something related to math, but it's pretty, I think it does a great job of illustrating how you have this confirmation bias. It's called the Monty Hall problem. Okay? So there was this show called the Monty Hall, and we'll stick with the red sports car, and it said behind one of these doors is a red sports car, and behind the other two is, let's say it's something that you don't want. Let's say it's a goat, and you really don't want a goat. Okay, maybe you do really want a goat, and you're going to be happy with a goat. In that case, congratulations. But let's assume that you really want the sports car. Okay, and so they would tell you, they'd ask you choose a door. Okay, and you chose, let's say you chose door A. Okay, then they would open door B, and B would have a goat in it. And then they would give you a very interesting question. They would ask you, do you stay with A or do you switch to C? Now, let me pose that question to you. Are you going to stay with A or are you going to switch to C? And if you really want to play this game, write down the answer. Don't lie to yourself. Write it down, what you think is the best option. Okay? Most people actually stay with door A. The logic that they have is that, well, I have two doors. I have a 50-50 shot. So I'm going to stay with A. You know why I'm going to stay with A? Because I've built a sort of relationship with A. It's a little bit better relationship than with C. It's a very superficial relationship. It's just you chose A versus choosing C. But you feel better with A, and you feel that you have a 50-50 shot, so you stay with A. You have some sort of bias towards A. Okay? Mathematically, what is actually occurring here is that initially you have a 33%, roughly a 33%, some of y'all are thinking it's 33.3, you have a 33% chance of winning, right? When I took away B and said, do you want to stay with A or do you want to switch to C? Your answer has a 33% chance of being correct, which then means everything else has a 66% chance of being correct. So in the next step, when I said I took away the middle one, the door B, that 66% all went to door C. So, and this is really, really interesting, because even if you chose door C initially, and then I took away B, it's still in your best interest at that point to switch to A. And this is something that confounded tons and tons and tons of mathematicians over the years. But the logic behind this is actually true, that no matter what, it's always in your best interest to always switch. So it's a perfect illustration of that your intuition, your bias says, oh, choose this. But logically, it's always better to switch. Okay? So, do a little probability in math in an English class. All right. So, you want to avoid the confirmation bias. Read with a purpose. 3, do not let your mind wander by reading too far ahead, right? So you want to read, but you don't want to read too much. 4, always read a little further than your answer. So when you're answering these questions, do not just sit there and stop right where you think the answer is. No, go a little further, because there might be more to the context of the problem than you realize. All right, let's take all this, let's implement it into the problem. Okay, so we're back into this question. Let me go ahead and I'm going to erase all of this. And wow, it's been 20 minutes of video, and now we're actually attacking this problem. Okay, let's do it. So the question again says, the passage most strongly, so again, most strongly, so we know that there might be multiple correct answers, but we're going to choose the best one, suggests that Adelita used which of the following to navigate her 9,000-mile journey. So I'm going to read, okay? In 1996, a loggerhead turtle called Adelita swam across 9,000 miles from Mexico City to Japan, crossing the entire Pacific on her way. So I want you to notice something, that as you read that, it says swam across the 9,000 miles, right? So it's talking about what's going on. I'm reading with a purpose. But it doesn't say how she did it, what was her navigation. It just said that she did it, right? So there's nothing important there, really, okay? Wallace J. Nichols tracked this epic journey with a satellite tag. But Adelita, remember, Adelita is the turtle. The turtle herself had no such technology at her disposal. How did she steer a route across 2 oceans to find her destination? The answer to this question is the answer to our question, right? Let's read the next paragraph. Nathan Putman has the answer. By testing hatchling turtles in a special tank, he has found that they use the Earth's magnetic field as their own global positioning system, or their own GPS, right? So he found that they use Earth's magnetic field as their own GPS. By sensing the field, they can work out both their latitude and longitude and head. Okay, so I actually think we have sufficient information to answer this question. Okay, let's see. The answer is, I'm saying, how was they able to do it? They used Earth's magnetic field. Okay, let's read A. The current of the North Atlantic gear, I don't know what that word is. Doesn't matter. It's not the answer. Okay, it's not talking about magnetic fields. Cues from electromagnetic coils designed by Putnam and Lohmann. Okay, this says electromagnetic, but we're talking about electromagnetic fields, so that's not going to be correct. The inclination and intensity of Earth's magnetic field. Boom. That sounds pretty good, right? We're saying the Earth's magnetic field. Look, even in the question, it says turtles use Earth's magnetic field, right? Right? That's how they're doing it. Adelita is the turtle, right? A simulated magnetic signature configured by Lohmann. Nope. There's my answer. Okay? So, again, what did we do? Okay? We understood the tone. We didn't just jump straight to the first thing, right? Right? We weren't confused by the language, right? We weren't intimidated by words like electromagnetism, right? We read the question, but not the answer choices, right? We didn't go too far. I just read 2 paragraphs. And I read a little further, right? I didn't just stop. I felt the answer was in the first paragraph of the first sentence in the second paragraph. But I went a little further. By sensing the field, they can work with latitude and longitude and head in the right direction. And there we got our answer. So hopefully that makes sense, and I'll see you in the next video.